drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
Texas law SB 4 to allow state and local authorities to make arrests for illegal entry isn't going into play right now, and then it's still in legal limbo. They know these things. The cartels are very smart.
New York City is a self-declared sanctuary city.
Republicans are playing politics with human beings, using them as props.
And we're back, and we have some familiar faces and some new faces today on Survival Dispatch News. In the Hawaiian shirt, my good friend Jeff MD, 26-year CIA operative, our in-house 007. Mike Sterling, our mad bomber. If you might have noticed, by the way, when he held his hand up, he has all of his fingers. Pretty unusual for somebody who's been diffusing bombs for the past 30 years.
Huh? What?
And maybe some TBIs too, but we won't go down that rabbit hole. But we've got one familiar face, Todd Callender. Todd, introduce yourself one more time to the Survival Dispatch News audience.
Sure. Pleasure to be here. I'm honored because you really do have the Rolodex of a king, Chris. So I'm a lawyer by training. As you might have mentioned, I'm the CEO of Clout Hub, which is a social media platform we acquired a little more than a year ago, which was God's joke on me because prior to that, I never had a social media account. I run a multinational insurance group for my day job. And then when I'm not doing that, I sue the U.S. government for fun. My last one was Robert V. Austin. I sued the Secretary of Defense, Health and Human Services, and the FDA to stop the shots, to stop the mandate in the military. And at the end of the day, we actually ended up winning it, but not by court means, by other means. Happy to be here.
Todd, before I move on to Todd Savage, what's coming up for 5G and the microwave radiation that the towers give off?
Thank you for that. So people are now coming to understand that humanity itself is under attack. And the Cairo Population Accords in 1994, the countries of this world that met there actually meant it. They want to reduce the world's population by 7 billion. We screwed up the mechanism of attack through the shots. It's not going to work again. It's already blown it, so they're going to move to the 5G network. And so everybody's getting nuked right now. You are getting cooked by the same frequencies your microwave oven uses just by existing. It's not safe, and we are going to file a global class action lawsuit to stop that and other vectors of death that the owners have dreamed up how to kill humanity and 7 billion people. So stay tuned. That one's coming.
That lawsuit's a really big deal, and I just want to add an anecdotal comment. So obviously, as a survival company, we have all sorts of equipment kicking around, including base station radios, which that's hooked to. Mike and I actually put the 40-foot antenna up together. We were testing some different antennas before Mike and I put that up, and one of them was sitting on my desk here, and being the dummy that I am, I have my hand on it and I hit the PTT button, and I had an SWR meter on it at the time and smoked myself with 70 watts of power. Like, wow, literally burned my hand from it. And I mentioned to Todd Callender before that when you discuss things like cell phone towers giving off radiation, you can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't feel it. It's a nebulous concept. Well, I would encourage anybody who has any questions with regards to energy floating around the atmosphere, just do like I did. Grab a hold of an antenna while you hit the PTT button, and you will quickly discover that that is real energy being dispersed through the atmosphere. I'm the official test dummy for crash test dummy for Survival Dispatch. Mike will tell you that. Todd Savage, we've been friends for a couple of years now, former Marine. You've got a really interesting story of why and how you created your business, Survival Retreat Consulting. Please introduce yourself to our audience.
Hey, thank you very much, Chris. Appreciate it. So my family and I wanted to escape the San Francisco Bay Area back in 2003 to 2006. And it took us about 3 years to make the escape, to flee the city, because we couldn't find somebody that would help us evaluate properties under 4 conditions. water, energy, food, and defense. So we would call real estate agents and other people, hey, can you go out and look at a property and see if this works for us? And they'd be busy and they couldn't help us. So it took us 3 years to get to the Northwest Montana and North Idaho area. And so after we made that relocation, we obviously were in real estate in California. My wife actually came up with the idea, hey, why don't you start this company and let's help folks like us that can just call somebody and we'll take care of it. And you know that you're in good hands. So we started the company 2006, and we provide life preservation solutions for societal collapse. So what that means is I want to leave a big city. I want to be able to either have a bug out location where we can go when things happen, or two, we want to make a strategic relocation and actually maybe homeschool our family, start a family business. We can use Starlink to work from home, get 5 acres, 10 acres, 1,000 acres, doesn't matter. We want to be able to have a small little family farm, put some storage supplies away in a safe place, maybe have a bunker, etc., and be able to shoot on our property, do training, and just live a sustainable life outside of a small town in rural America, anywhere. It doesn't have to be Idaho. It can be the Appalachians. It could be in Texas. Not a big deal. But the ability that I need to be able to call somebody that knows what I don't know, that will teach me and allow us to go down this path to make this escape from the city and become self-sufficient and be able to not be a burden on society when something happens, be part of the solution, not part of the problem.
Appreciate that, Todd. And just so our audience is clear, we're going to cover some very unique options today for every type of budget, small, big, and in between, for people to actually have somewhere to escape to, or as my wife would say, somewhere that's not too people-y. So, Rick, that brings you into the conversation. Last but not least, of course, you have got an amazing business model at a price point that is absolutely incredible, pardon me. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Rick, and tell us all about Land of Land.
Thank you very much for having me today, Chris. Land of Land was never intended to be a retail establishment. Land was what I viewed as the smartest option to protect my family's net worth in an environment where our elected officials have no regard for the long-term fiscal well-being of our country, but are more interested in preserving power by spending money fecklessly. As a result, I felt that since our currency is not secured by gold or silver, but rather the full faith and credit of the U.S. government, which is not insubstantial, but it's an amount, right? And the denominator is the number of dollars in circulation, much like a company that's issuing more and more shares. Given that we're pushing $2 trillion a year in deficits, our debt continues to grow and grow. And as we get to the $40–50 trillion in debt level over the next 5 to 10 years, our interest expense is going to start to approach $2 trillion a year. And we only bring in $5 trillion or so on the federal level. So our interest expense starts to approach 40% of all of our revenues. So at some point, investors are going to say, this is the greatest financial bubble in history. We require a higher interest rate in order to compensate us for the considerable risk associated with purchasing U.S. government bonds. And so the interest rate starts ticking up. And as the interest rate starts ticking up, the snowball gets larger and larger, because 50 trillion times now 7%, is 3.5 trillion. Now, it doesn't happen, in overnight, but as people start acknowledging this fear, the number gets greater and greater, and the value of each incremental dollar is smaller and smaller. So I said, well, how do I protect my family? I'm certainly not going to be running for office anytime soon, and I'm not going to be able to turn around this battleship. And I looked at a couple of different options. Gold, Bitcoin were a couple of them. But one thing I really loved about land was that it had utility. It wasn't just a place to protect your assets from inflation, but it also is a place that you can use, and you can use it for hunting and fishing and camping, or just having a place to go, a bug out location, as it were. Initially, this was not intended to be a strategy to be shared with others, but as I explained to people, the direction that I was going, more and more people seem to want to participate. We have now, over the last several years, accumulated thousands of properties all over the United States. And as you pointed out earlier, our average transaction size is only about $5,000. We've got some lots that are about 1,000. And clearly, if you're looking for hundreds of acres in northern Maine with harvestable timber, that kind of thing, the price can certainly go up from there. But the bottom line is we have many solutions for those who are looking for a dual purpose of A, protecting their portfolio, and B, having a place to go when the shit hits the fan.
That's awesome, Rick. Like I said earlier, I'm really looking forward to this discussion because you bring some very unique stuff to the table, as do Todd and Todd. So it's kind of an interesting point in time for us all to come together like this. So.
Land of Land, your trusted source for extraordinary vacant land across America that expresses your unique, special passions while diversifying your investment portfolio and hedging against runaway inflation. Imagine the thrill and prestige of land ownership, owning a piece of America, making the best investment on earth as simple as an online purchase. Off-the-grid serenity, pricing from $1,000 payable by credit card. Visit us today at landofland.com, America's premier land wholesaler for over a decade.
Before we dive into it deeper, Mike, do you want to hit us with the conflicted question of the day, please?
Would be happy to. This is a doozy. You guys are going to like this one. After hunting for game in the wilderness, 2 of your friends were bitten by the same kind of venomous snake. You are the only one unharmed, and you have 1 vial of anti-venom antidote. Both of your friends have lost consciousness, and they have their kids and wives waiting for their return. But you can save only one of them. A full dose of the antidote is needed in order to save a life. Anything less would be just a waste. What criteria would you use to save one of them, and why? And we will all discuss this at the very end, but we want to hear from you out there. What are your thoughts?
That's a brutal question.
Yeah, it is.
I'm glad we've got people smarter than me on this panel because I'll go last. All right, so let's jump into bugging out. So 83% of Americans live in cities, urban areas, and realistically have nowhere to bug out to. So I've mentioned before, and we had some people speak at length on this particular topic, but within a couple months of the stock market crashing in 1929, it became front page news if somebody spotted a deer. The population of the country was half of what it currently is. So the prospect of urbanites going out to the country and living off the land are pretty much slim to none. Now, with that being said, for those people who are paying attention and have a high level of situational awareness, there's usually a window of opportunity, 12, 18, 24 hours when things are getting bad, but most people do not realize the gravity of the situation, that you could actually get out of a city. Because once the gravity does sink in, and I'll think back to the hurricanes we had in 04, 05, we got smacked by 4 major storms. And every time when there was an evac order, people would wait until the last minute and then they decide, I think I need to evac. I-95 was a parking lot from here all the way well into North Carolina and Virginia. So getting out of town ahead of time is good, but you got to have somewhere to go to. So I'm just going to throw out this idea. We've covered it before in SDN, so I'm not going to go super in depth with it. But if you have a storage unit, or if you have a couple $100 a month at disposable income, one way to have somewhere to bug out to is go rent a storage unit out of town, somewhere in a rural area, fill it full of preps, food and water and all the stuff that goes with that, ammunition and guns. Make some trips there, go to restaurants, meet some of the locals. And as you can see, these are close to my zip code. When you get to a more rural location than this, instead of $184 a month for 10 by 15, $165, $175, $151, it's not a huge sum of money. And it does give you somewhere to escape to. And if you already have a storage unit here that you're paying for, and you go get a storage unit there and you put your stuff in it, you're really not spending any more than you would originally. So that's option number one for people who are on a tight budget. But option number two, and the only reason this exists is because of meeting Rick and his company and what they offer. I had no idea that you could get property at these price points. So Rick, I know you just did a lengthy introduction or medium introduction. It was good. And people kind of had an idea of what you do at landofland.com. But explain it to somebody like me. Let's say that I'm looking for a piece of property that we can bug out to, and I want something that's in a remote location. How long's the process take to find that piece of property for me working with you and your team?
Well, first of all, thanks again, Chris. We own all of the property that we sell. Our constraint is the county clerks. Each county, if you look at each county sort of as a jigsaw puzzle, the county clerk is in charge of determining who owns each of the pieces. And if you sell one of the pieces to somebody else, they've got to change the records. If you subdivide one of the pieces, they've got to make reference to who owns each of the 2 or 4 or 6 pieces now. And absent there being any county clerk snafus, we can have property in your name within 2 hours.
Wow.
What we need is a name and address and payment, which we can take by credit card over the phone. And with that, we can get a deed filed with the county and recorded in your name within 2 hours. However, that's a function of which county we're talking about. Some counties allow us to file deeds electronically, so it goes very quickly. Some resort to snail mail, in which case we do have to mail it in, and we've got to wait a week or 2 or 3, and then wait for the recorded deed to be mailed back to us. So it's not always that quick, but it's often that quick.
That's absolutely amazing. I'll just pull up your website quickly, Rick. So landofland.com. And I've been on your website a number of times now. I like the map that you have where you can explore different states and what's available. And I'm just showing it so that our followers see how easy it is. So we could take one of these bubbles and pop it up, and here's some information on this particular piece of property. So let's say I'm interested in this piece of property or properties in this area. What's the next step, Rick? Do I have to call you? Do we do this by email? What's it look like?
We can easily do it by email, and we can send you payment instructions and simply respond to the email with the name and address that you'd like on the deed. It could be in your name, your wife's name, your company name, your kid's name, however you'd like to structure it. And then we can take payment, larger amounts via wire transfer, smaller amounts via credit card. We can send you an online credit card payment link so that you can take care of it online. And again, it only takes a few minutes. We're happy to chat with you as well to help you determine the appropriate venue. You know, you may want a place that's a bit bigger, a bit hotter, a bit cooler. You know what I mean? I want a certain amount of space. I want to be able to shoot guns. I want to be able to build a house. All of these factors would influence where we would steer you in order to find the best possible fit that gives you that bug out location, but also a very good bang for the buck from a financial perspective, so that you can also protect your assets by diversifying into land. And for those who are looking at land as more than just a single bug out location, we would recommend diversifying not only your portfolio by putting some land in it, but also diversifying that portion of your portfolio attributed to land into multiple locations. So I would further subdivide that category.
At any moment, all electronics could cease to function. This includes your car, your home, your business, and our entire electrical infrastructure. Learn how you can protect yourself from a massive electrical disturbance today. Visit www.empro.com or call 833-EMP-PRO-4 today.
Go ahead, Todd.
So I have a question. Because the land is so affordable that is being offered, if someone has a destination bug out route, so they're going to be a survivor, not a refugee. A refugee has no place to go. They just wander. A survivor has a place to go. So if someone can get on Land of Land and identify, hey, I'm going to go to this place, but it's going to be a journey because that's the ultimate place I want to be. But I can buy 2 or 3 separate parcels from Land of Land and put small amounts of storage items that I'm going to need along my route or alternative routes to finally get to a place. I think that would be a great idea. It's so affordable that somebody could look at that and say, hey, this is going to work really good for my family and I because it's along our route. And then the place we ultimately get to, they're able to have something a little bit bigger and sustain longer. And then for those that obviously aren't in a large price range, I love this. This is great because we get calls all the time from folks that say, hey, I just have this. I don't have $1 million. I need to be able to have something that's going to work for me. And being a survivor means you have the ability to do that and to provide for your family. You don't want to fail your family and become a refugee. So even a half acre, it costs $5,000, $10,000, whatever it is. And I'm able to put a storage unit there and have some supplies that are ready. I think it's great. It's fantastic. I'm very happy to learn of this. I've just learned of it a week or two ago. So doing a great job.
Todd Savage, I have to ask you, when did you get access to my text messages? Because I forgot to mention to Rick, Todd and I have a friend by the name of Kyle Reyes, and he's got some really interesting businesses, one of which is lawenforcementtoday.com. It's massive traffic that goes to that website. Here's one for you, Rick. So when Kyle and I were discussing this, he wants to talk to you because he has a home just south of Jacksonville. He has another one in Connecticut. And his line of thinking was same as Todd Savage's, that they'd like to buy small parcels between here and there so they actually have a destination to get to on the way if the shit hits the fan. That's crazy that you would suggest that, Todd. You're clearly a super smart guy. Go ahead, Rick.
Actually, it's very smart to have not only a location, but also a route. So I'm glad you brought that up because sometimes people don't think that part through, and they've got a place that's going to take 3 days to drive to, and it may not be as simple to get there as they think. So breaking it up in that logical fashion makes a hell of a lot of sense.
It does. Todd Callender?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention another aspect to this thing and I love the brilliance of it. And I said it to Rick yesterday. He and I are also in the financial industry. Would you rather store your wealth in a bank account where all the banks are insolvent? I promise you, all of them are. Or would you rather store your wealth in something that somebody can't literally pick up and run away with? The analysis is literally that easy. And this is bankable, so to speak, right? There is some liquidity that creates out of this. But it is a fixed deposit in essence, and it's just a safe move. I don't see any way you can go wrong with this.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many benefits to it. Absolutely. So I want to get everybody's input on suggestions that people in our audience could do with these pieces of land. I'm just going to throw one out there quickly. One of the things that crossed my mind was, okay, so we buy a piece of property like this, get a storage container and drop it on there. We now have something that's protected from the weather. We could put solar panels, power stations, food, water, all kinds of stuff in them. So I was looking, I wanted to see what the prices were. So Rick, like if I bought a piece of property from you for $1,000, $2,000 for another, call it $1,400 to $2,400, I can put a storage container on that property. And now I'm not even paying like that monthly fee, which I alluded to earlier with storage companies. It's not that expensive a way to go. So I'll start with you, Rick, but I'd like everybody to weigh in on this as far as your ideas. You buy a piece of land for peanuts. You know, I've got guns that cost 7, 8 times what some of these parcels of land are. I want to hear everybody's input as to what your recommendations are to do with the property. So Rick, you first, please.
Well, you might not be in a location where there's a lot of security. So there is the risk that someone tries to break into the storage container. And some of the properties that we own are in developments of sort, and there might be some restriction with regard to what you can do with the property in terms of dropping a storage facility on the property. But those caveats aside, the vast majority of the properties are absolutely suitable for this. And this is an outstanding solution to really providing yourself not only a location, but also the necessary supplies once you arrive at that location.
Security wise, I was thinking, you know, you probably have access to Starlink. You could put surveillance systems on it, some sort of alarm system. But Todd Savage, question for you. Rick brings up a good point. Let's say for whatever reason, we can't put a storage container on that property. Could we dig a hole and put the storage container in the hole and cover it up? And the reason I ask is because you've done some very elaborate bunkers.
So what we recommend on that budget level is you never want to bury a storage container unless it's engineered correctly, right? For various issues. However, a lot of our clients in that price range will get a septic tank, brand new from wherever local place they get it. It's clean, obviously. I think they're maybe $1,200 somewhere in there. Plastic, right? So you can do concrete as well, but I recommend plastic. So if you had to go in and get a septic permit for $100, nobody is going to drive by or see you with an excavator and you're dropping in this tank, which is a septic tank. They're not going to say anything. Oh, they're just putting in a septic. Regardless if you have a storage container on the property or not, all of your high-end items, your night vision, firearms, ammo, all of that is going to go into that container underneath the ground and be sealed up. We had one client take an old car that was shot up and rusted and pull it over the top of it. The lid is there, covered up, push this car there. It'd take 3 or 4 guys to roll it over, but then now it's completely disguised. Nobody with a metal detector is even going to go close to that car looking for anything, correct? So there's a lot of really easy on the budget ways to store your valuable items. You could still have a container, but put in, tents, fire making equipment, some food, stuff like that. Sure, that's fine. You can replace those things. You can hunt, you can build a shelter, but the items that you're going to need to actually survive have to be buried. You can't see them. And if you get there and you cannot get to those items, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So a septic tank is perfect. Plastic septic tank.
I was going to say, I've seen people turn their containers into housing as well. Kind of to your point.
Absolutely.
Some of them quite elaborate as well, and really nice, and it costs pennies to put the superstructure up. So Mike, I know you've got something to add on this, and then I'll go to Jeff. Jeff seems to me like putting something in the ground with a car over top of it, with a hatch in the car to get into it, is very CIA-esque, for lack of a better term. But I'll do Mike first, then Jeff.
All right, I'm gonna one first to Todd's point. I'm gonna quote Rodney Dangerfield from Caddyshack, saying that if you own anything but land, you own a popcorn fart. Yeah, wise words from a crazy man.
Wise words.
Yep. Next, Jeff, about the opening the back of the car in order to get down into your residence. What was that movie, Red, where
yeah, the crazy one.
Yeah, the really crazy one. That was his entrance, and everybody was like, "Well, what's the house? It's a decoy, stupid. We live down here." Yeah. How he built that big underground bunker in the middle of a Louisiana swamp, I have no idea. But
yeah, that's Hollywood.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, 100%. Yes, absolutely. Never bury a shipping container unless you are prepared to build concrete structure around said shipping container first. Those are meant for all the weight to go on the corners. The sides will collapse in, the top will collapse in. Yeah, it doesn't work out real well at all. Ask me how I know. Yeah. Somebody tried to build a bunker. Yeah, somebody tried to build a bunker in Iraq and didn't do his research first. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. So, of course, one of the very first things that you're going to need to do when it comes to location first, you're going to need to do a vulnerability study on this site. Determine, hey, is this in a vulnerable site? Even if it's just if it's a waypoint, that's one thing. Is it going to be an accessible waypoint for me? Is this an area that's going to be, is it going to be in a fallout zone? Is it going to be completely covered in 19 feet of snow? Is it in a flood zone? And I'm going to try and bury up all my stuff. Well, that'll be great. It's in a flood zone. Now it's covered by 4 feet of water. How am I going to get into it? Stuff like that. So you've got to know what it is that you're doing first. It's got to match what you're going to do with it. Now, if you're just looking at it as a waypoint, just, hey, look, this is going to be a semi-safe place for me to just stop. I've got 40 gallons of water. I've got a little bit of ammo and some camping gear and some food stored there because I'm on my way to my next place. You know what? Then the vulnerabilities that are going to affect such a site get a lot smaller. All right. But your intel prep is an absolute necessity on these sort of things. Also, if you're going to store things like fuel at a site like that, you're going to have to get into it a whole lot more often. Because the sort of thing is gonna have to be rotated. So at that point, those sort of things, your site security becomes a little bit more dicey because now the neighbors see you coming in and out at intervals like once every 6 months in the middle of the night, and then you leave. Okay, now the neighbors are going to think something. Okay, so these are things that you've got to look out for.
So I'd like to point out, thanks, Mike, for raising this, that this is on Todd's website and this is in Todd's wheelhouse. All the stuff you're describing to do an evaluation of the site with all the considerations that you raised. He's a subject matter expert in this, and necessity is the mother of all invention. Like he said, he went looking for somebody to guide him through this process, and there was nobody. So he invented the SOPs himself, came up with them himself. And I just want to make sure it's a shameless plug, but it's still a valid comment. If you're looking for help with something like this, reach out to Todd's company, survivalretreatconsulting.com. Sorry to interrupt, Mike. Go ahead.
No, I'll tell you what, go back to Atlas. I absolutely adore the innovation from Atlas. Go back to that picture. That is amazing. So here's a great thing. If you're worried about a nuclear attack or something like that, one of the absolute best shieldings in the world from nuclear radiation is water. Congratulations. You've got a huge quantity of water sitting right up on top of your shelter. Not a single bit of hard radiation is going to wind up bouncing into there. That's for sure. No gamma, no neutron, no nothing.
Just neutrinos.
Yeah, and who cares?
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's amazing. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that is an awesome innovation right there.
Why nuclear reactors are in pools of water.
Right. Exactly. And also the same reason why that nuclear warhead in Arkansas, we haven't been able to find it yet. And it's been sitting there since the 60s.
Fair enough.
Yep.
Jeff, give us your thoughts on buying a piece of land for a song and a dance from Rick, and then how you could leverage it and utilize that land.
Well, yeah, I think you need, if it depends on whether you're using it as a waypoint to another location, or is it your final location? If it's your final location, you need to really be looking at, okay, I'm in the desert, I'm in Arizona. Is there water nearby? Is there water available? Can I sink a well without having to drill 1,000 feet? Like where I am now, I could plop a well here because I'm right over an aquifer, but you don't know that. Also, one thing I do like is the idea of burying it in a plastic septic tank, because when you're in the desert, it gets really freaking hot here. And if you have a metal container sitting out in the sun at 110 degrees, inside that metal container is going to be about 160 degrees, 170 degrees. When you bury it, you take on the ambient temperature of the ground, which in most places is in the mid to high 70s once you get down a certain depth. That's kind of the baseline temperature of the earth. And that preserves things. That's a really good temperature. And in some places here in the desert, it's freaking hotter than the hubs of hell in the summer and colder than a witch's tit in the winter. And you think about the food you store. If you're storing it, you're in a metal box in the desert, you're basically storing it in an oven that is set to 160 degrees, and you're going to leave it there for years. Not going to be very good when you come to get it. So underground is definitely the way to go. But I would make sure, depending on where you are, if that's going to be your final stop, okay, what are you doing for water? First and foremost, water. You can go a long time without food. You can't go very long without water. So, if you have a site, and if you can have a site in the middle of the desert, but you got to be prepared for that. Store plenty of water there. Find out where there's sources nearby. You can replenish your water if you need to.
So, Rick, quick question for you, and then Todd Callender, I want to get your thoughts on what you would recommend people do with a piece of land like this. But Rick, is part of your acquisition process predicated on availability of water, those sort of things, or is that just it's up to the individual?
Well, the various properties have different access to water, but for the most part, you can drill a well. The question is simply depth. So, worst case scenario, you've got to drill down 700 feet or something as opposed to 200 feet, and it's a little more expensive. But if getting to water is what you seek, it is almost always available and certainly storable.
Yeah. Okay. Appreciate that. Hold on, Mike. I want to hear Todd Callender's input on.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things.
Land.
Well, what I wanted to understand is really a question for Todd as well, is how big do these septic tanks come? Because it strikes me that that's a surrogate for the container. If they're big enough to do it, obviously, getting access is a different matter, but I have a vision that these are big. In terms of bug out, I've got kind of a formula already, which is to go and plant what it is that could sustain you already. So go and do that. And even if it goes wild, it doesn't really matter. It's already there, right? That's something that you can fix, you can improve it, but you don't have to go through all the process of preparing the land to grow things. And the reality is that if you're in such a crappy situation as that you have to bug out, you're going to be gone for a long time. Mm-hmm. So you'd better make your preps to be really comfortable, because you'd better plan on making yourself self-sufficient. And what you said about Animals, people have this romantic idea they're going to go hunt deer and elk, and all you have to do is buy a tag opening day of rifle season, and you'll never see, another deer around anywhere because they're really smart. And it's like they know. So anyway, my point is I'd rather be by a big body of water and fish. That's kind of my formula.
Well, if you want to hunt deer, all you got to do is plant flowers.
There you go. Yes.
Just do landscape.
Come running.
They'll be there in a heartbeat.
So Todd Savage, what are your thoughts on Todd Callender's thoughts as far as like how big can the tanks be? Can you connect them together? Could it be, like he said, a surrogate to another container? Inquiring minds want to know.
Yeah, they're probably, I think dimensionally, maybe 6 to 8 feet one side, 4 to 6 feet. So there's not a lot of room. I don't think you'd want to try and cut holes to connect them. I think it's a, above ground access, grab what you need and go.
Okay.
And they're fairly inexpensive. And the key along the way is if you're trying to bug out, how quickly can you access it? What items are there? You could store some water in there. I wouldn't put any fuel in there at all. Obviously, that's going to be an issue if there was a leak or something like that. You'd probably want to bury that somewhere else. Find a different way to do that. 20 feet away. But I did have a question. If a client calls Land of Land and says, "Hey, found this great parcel. It's out of my price range. It's $250,000. It's 100 acres, but I only, I want a 1 acre piece." Do you guys purchase something, go through the process of breaking it up, and then offer it for sale? I just thought of that and figured that maybe that's a good idea. I'm not sure if that's in your wheelhouse or what you guys do.
It is. It's not our primary focus, but we have done some subdivisions in Texas, and we're doing some in Maine now as well. We generally purchase properties and sell them in the same structure or size, but
Okay.
we do dabble, and we are, opportunistic. We're looking to find the best way to create value for our customer. So sometimes breaking up a larger piece of property where we can benefit from the volume discount of the size and then splitting it into smaller pieces is a better way for us to be able to keep our pencils sharp and keep our prices competitive to our customers.
Good
Right.
question,
As long as
Todd.
it's outside the county or outside a city that is an issue with permitting, in a county that's pretty easy to do a quick subdivision, depending on the state, so that your time into that project is pretty quick. You don't want to have something that takes a year or two to do something. It takes 3 or 4 months to do it. It might be easier. So anyway, I just thought that might be an idea. So
It's a very good point.
Mike Sterling.
Yeah, just for a little bit of reference on those septic tanks. I just found a 1,500 gallon one. That's about the top end, 157 inches long, about 13 feet, 69 inches wide, 51 inches high. So you're not going to go standing up inside there a whole lot, but it's a good place to be able to store your stuff if you've got, $3,000 to get it there.
Beautiful.
Also, another thing on the water issue, just because you have water doesn't mean it's good water. You gotta that's another big thing. Before you go doing this stuff, you got to make sure that that's good water. I was some friends of mine and I were actually looking at a place in Eastern Tennessee, and it turns out that and I turned everybody on to, hey, look, we need to actually look at the water at this thing. And it turned out it was just downstream. It was a reclaimed mine site, and that water was garbage and was going to be garbage for the next 50 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jeff?
Another option besides septic tanks is what they have out here a lot in Arizona are large water harvesting tanks. And those can be thousands of gallons. And they're plastic, they're corrugated, because a lot of people like to bury them as to collect rain off your roof to, farmers use it for their cattle, or, they harvest water, for, out in the boonies or around their farms. They're a lot bigger, and you get them at like Tractor Supply. You can put them on a trailer, take them out and bury them. and you don't need a septic permit because it's not septic.
The same
Rain
Tractor
purposes.
Supply that just lost $2 billion in market cap because
Yeah.
of woke bullshit.
Yeah, but they
they
also
turned
said,
it, but they turned it around.
They did turn it around real fast. We've gotten rid of all of our DEI.
Yeah, apparently they didn't want to be the next Bud Light.
No, they're trying desperately. But anyway, those ranch supply places, farm supply, you can get really big water harvesting, tanks, and they're kind of the same way. They have they got a plastic lid that you lift off, but you can bury them, and they're designed to be buried.
And if you know a little bit about working concrete, you can concrete case those things. You just got to do it a little bit at a time. You just got to be smart about it. But yeah, you can do it.
Well, and because they're round, they don't collapse from the side. It's, they're big round tanks, flat on the top, flat on the bottom. And, they generally use to have a pump down there to pump the water out for whatever you're going to use it for.
Yeah, it's a good point, Jeff.
Giant rain barrel.
Todd Callender's probably familiar with this. I don't know if anybody else is, but the water table is so high here in Florida that if you take the water out of your pool, it will pop out of the ground. And I'm talking like cement pools. There was a guy that my pool guy looked after years ago, had moved here from somewhere up north, had this huge swimming pool, and the kids convinced him to drain the water from the pool so they could use it for skateboarding. And my pool guy ended up showing up a couple days later, and the whole thing had popped out of the ground and cracked. It was $150,000 in damage to the foundation of the house, the patio, and the pool itself. So for people in Florida to be aware, you're not going to bury stuff too far underground here without it literally popping out of the ground.
One more thing to say about that. I live on an island, and one of the mistakes people make here when they're drilling wells is they drill them too deep. Why? Because salt water is more dense than fresh water. So the freshwater table's on top of the saltwater table for people in Florida.
Yeah, that's a great point, Todd. So Todd Savage, quick question for you, since we're discussing all this subterranean stuff. Describe this piece of property to us.
Well, it'd be interesting. What's the right thing to say? There's more to it than you might see above ground. But yeah, this is a unique property that is no longer owned by one of our clients. So that's why it's on the website. We don't put any pictures of anything that somebody currently owns, which would break OPSEC. But that rotunda up there is a nice place to have coffee and make long range shots from. Very interesting.
That's interesting. So Todd and Mike both know Philip Tapino from WAFT, where our family's trained in Groveland, Florida. If you look them up and try to map it, you'll get a balloon in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. It's a $20 million training facility for private individuals. And Philip lives on prem in addition to, he's got indoor training facilities. The bathrooms in this place, the range bathrooms, over $100,000 invested in each bathroom. It's incredible. It's like a playground for adults, but he has a turret like that on top of his home that has ports in it all the way around. He said, yeah, that's for my 300 Remington Ultra Mag to intercept anybody who's coming towards my property. But definitely interesting. So let's take things to the next level here. And so Todd Callender, your company bought a massive piece of land in Chile. Tell us about that, and then I'll pull up the PDF after you kind of
It's I think it's the single largest piece of congruent private land in South America, if memory serves. It's 850 square miles effectively. And we acquired it not for the land mass itself, but really for a 8-kilometer long peninsula that sticks out into the South Pacific in such a way that it acts as a natural breakwater to a geological anomaly. And that is that the lee side of it is deep water. It's 30 meters, so about basically 100 feet deep. And why that's important is because it can accommodate big ships like China Max size vessels or 400,000 metric tons of cargo. So it's more economical to go to and from Asia if you're moving cargo. It also happens to be just on the other side of the Andes from the breadbasket of South America in Argentina, where all the world's governments have their food security. So it's China, U.S., Russia, and other nations. And so we acquired it on the basis that we're trying to build a port there. It's been a very lengthy process, but in the meantime, we have all this, land sitting around. We did town planning approval because we figured when we build the port, we're going to need, to house people there. And so we went to the trouble of actually going through all that process. And we have solar farms and a little bit of mining that happens in the area. As you can imagine, 850 square miles is a lot of land. But in all respects, it's largely vacant, except for the tuna that swim off the beach. About 50 miles of beachfront that's largely unutilized. There's really nobody there. So anybody that wanted to, plop down their own new city, we have it all available and there. We just haven't gotten there because we've spent the last 5 years trying to get through the bureaucracy to build our port.
So, hypothetically speaking, let's say this next election goes to hell in a handbasket. This would be a great location for people to escape to, essentially, right? Was that, or am I imagining things? I think you mentioned something to that effect way back when.
Yeah, it's exactly right. Because look, we've got everything that we're talking about here, aside from the land. There's fresh water, there's food supply. It's temperate. It never gets too hot, never gets too cold, and the water in the ocean is warm. So yeah, it's everything anybody could want. It just happens to be in the middle of nowhere.
So I think actually Mike Sterling was hoping that you might engage his services. He wants to go do a valuation of the property.
Yeah.
And,
I'd love to, man. That place is so freaking cool.
Yeah, thank you for that. It is cool, and it's kind of this strange happenstance. We ended up acquiring the property out of bankruptcy. This is kind of like what Rick does. You find some cheap land that somebody's in a pinch, and you seize the opportunity.
Good for you. Smart move.
I think we're going to need to have Keith come down too, because I'd be willing to bet that the Chinese intelligence services are going to cast a nice little eye on this too.
Well, it also happens to be the predetermined landing pad for the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. So yeah, they want it, and a few people have already tried to get at it, and the way it's structured, it's not possible.
He's referring to our mutual friend Todd Keith Graves, who's been on your show before.
Yep. Sure.
Okay, so just to kind of stitch all of this stuff together, essentially, if you live in a city and you're looking for somewhere to bug out to and you're on a fairly tight budget, you can always get a rental unit, put your preps there, become familiar with the area, and at least you have somewhere to go to if and when the shit hits the fan. At the next level up from that, we can go to Rick at Land of Land and get parcels for just incredible dollar values. I was blown away when I first met Rick and his team. I was like, that's insane. Again, I've spent 6, 7, 8 times as much on a gun, let alone a piece of property, which is in the end probably worth way more. So Rick, people can come to you. You've probably got something for just about everybody's budget. And it's not just those smaller dollar values, right? Like you can source larger parcels of property as well.
Without question. We like people who come back. We like repeat customers. So we're always trying to keep our inventory fresh, kind of like a diner that has specials and something new on the menu each time. It gives you another reason to go back. So people will open our email. They say, oh, I didn't realize you had something in Georgia now, or now you've got this, interesting large property in Maine where I can buy the property, harvest the trees, lower my cost basis, and still have the getaway that I was envisioning. We have a lot of properties in central Arkansas, which are extremely low cost to maintain, only about $10 a month. And yet you've got buildable lots with a community. And the community's got a lake and golf and community activities and so forth, all for only $10 a month. Now that might not suit everybody, but it does suit a lot of people. And so that's one of the things that has been very popular of late. But we're all over the country.
So my wife was recently in Arkansas for work, a small rural community. And when she came home, she said it was like a time warp. It was like going back to when we were kids in the 70s and 80s. And there's something to be said for that. It just tweaked me on a anecdotal story that I'll share just because it's funny. You know, I'm blind in my left eye, prosthetic eye. I'd ridden my motorcycle to Southern Ohio to visit family. And I pulled into this gas station and I grabbed my wallet out of the fairing of my motorcycle and I turn around and it's old mechanical pumps. And this is in Chillicothe, Ohio. And this old boy pokes his head around the corner. He says, "Son, you looking for somewhere to swap your credit card?" I said, "Yes, sir." I said, "I suppose I should go on inside and pay for my fuel first." And he said, "No, you don't got to worry about that here. Just fill her up." And he said, "Where are you all from?" And I said, "Well, we just rode up here from Central Florida." He said, "Well, son, let me tell you something. When the end of the world comes, get your ass back here as fast as you can because we won't see it for another 50 years. One of the funniest things a stranger's ever said to me in my entire life. But to my wife and I, who grew up on farms in rural locations, that's absolute heaven. It doesn't get better. Like I said, Cindy's constantly saying she's born and raised here in Florida. It's too people-y out. There's too many people here anymore. So
Too peoply.
Yeah. You can, that's a Cindy Heaven original.
I get it. I get it.
So moving up a little bit, say in budget, Rick, somebody comes to you, they buy a piece of land from you. Todd Savage at Survival Retreat Consulting is a great resource for people to tap into because he can tell them all of the mistakes he made and how he solved those mistakes over many years. He's got his process down pat now after 20 years. And so you don't have to do this all by yourself. There are resources out there. So picking up the call with the phone or going to your website, buy a piece of land, big, small, or otherwise, engaging somebody like Todd. And to be honest, I haven't found anybody else like Todd since we acquired Survival Dispatch. And if you're really concerned of what happens here in the continental US, you can buy into Todd Calendar's autonomous zone.
We'll take you.
Autonomous zone with no Antifa. This is autonomous good guys, not the bad guys, sort of thing. So, Mike, you want to hit us with the conflicted question and we'll wrap this thing up?
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, for our Marine here, you did a great job. I got something for you.
Grands. Oh, that's brilliant. Wow.
He usually reserves that strictly for Navy SEALs because we have a lot of Navy SEALs.
No. I have to pick on them. It's mandatory for me to pick on them. But for the Marines,
crayons
for the Marines.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Okay. All right. But you only get them if you give a good answer to the question. Don't get any stuck in your teeth.
All I can hear in my mind is, Todd, you did so good. You answered all of the questions. Here, have this ice cream cone.
You're such a good boy. Do I get a third scoop of ice cream? Thanks, Jill.
And a clean Depends.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
There's nothing quite like a clean Depends, right?
Oh.
I mean, I wouldn't know, Chris. Okay, so the question of the day, and we really want to hear from everybody out there in prepper land. Let's hear from you guys. After hunting for game in the wilderness, 2 of your friends were bitten by the same kind of venomous snake. You are the only one unharmed and have 1 vial of anti-venom antidote. Both of your friends have lost consciousness, and they have their kids and wives waiting for their return. But you can save only 1 of them. A full dose of the antidote is needed in order to save a life. Anything less would be just a waste. What criteria would you use to save 1 of them and why? You only get to save 1.
That's brutal. Jeff MD, you get to go first as per usual.
Okay. First, does one of these guys owe me money?
Oh, fabulous.
No, what I would look at was I would look at who has the most dependents back at the camp, compound, wherever you are. Because if one of them has 5 kids and one of them has 2 kids, I'm gonna, just out of freaking guilt, I'll probably have to say, I'm going to take care of the dead guy's family. And this is when the selfish part kicks in. Do I want to take care of 2 extra kids or 5 extra kids? So the one who has the most dependents at home, because it's going to have, that person dying would have a bigger impact, negative impact on the group. Then you take the one who, the family of the guy who died, and then we're all going to have to take care of him, or them. So it makes sense in a way. It kind of, it sounds harsh, but it minimizes the burden on the group. Instead of having 5 kids without a father to take care of them, you may only have 1 or 2. So I would look at it as, how best to deal with that. And that would be the choice.
In typical fashion, that's a great answer, Jeff. I mean, that's a phenomenal answer. I'm looking at everybody else probably saying, okay, we can just wrap this thing up now. But I won't do that because I don't want to let anybody off the hook. So I'll go to Todd Savage next.
Well, I think the way I'd look at it, I'm not a big guy. If that person still needs to be carried out, first would be, can I carry them? So I guess who's ever smaller. If that wasn't a factor, you just give the dose and they'll survive. Then I would probably look at, if this is under a SHTF situation, who has more value to the group? So if it was between somebody saving me and the doctor that's with the group, I'm just a gun guy, right? I can shoot people, whatever. Anybody can do that. The doctor has to survive. So I think you'd prioritize it that way. Who has more value to the group? I mean, it's just black and white in that scenario. And if it wasn't under those conditions and things were good, and I guess it would have to come back down to who can I exfil out of there and rescue if I need to help them get out after giving that dose. So that's best I can do on that one.
Awesome answer, Todd. I mean, Jeff leaves a big set of shoes to fill. That was a really, really good answer.
And real quick, whoever has the best gear that we get, we're going to leave them behind so we could split their gear up, right?
Yeah, that's the rules. That's grunt rule 1. Whoever dies first, we're splitting up your gear.
Todd Callender.
Yeah, I'm a little bit more clinical. I want to know what comorbidities these guys have, because just because you've got some antivenom doesn't mean they're going to survive, right? One guy might be 500 pounds and diabetic and it needs insulin anyway that you're not going to get for him. The other guy wouldn't. So you have to go with all things being equal. That's what economists say. They're damn liars. You look at things clinically, and I think that's exactly right, is the one who adds the most value. But I like the way Jeff said it too. But anyway, I would go with the person who is most likely to succeed in surviving. Just because they have venom doesn't mean they're going to get there.
Good answer, Todd. Rick, what are you thinking?
Well, I'm making the presumption that we're expecting to live and we're expecting to return to society, and we're not going to have to repopulate. And so I'm not going to be concerned about the gender as much. So I would look as which is the greater friend, more entertaining to be around, which has provided the greatest contribution to society and likely contribution to the group to get us through. All those things being equal and the same number of kids and responsibility, I would give preference to the one younger. And if it looked like we were likely to starve, I would have to be cold-hearted and look at the one which would provide the most food if it were necessary to eat the one that didn't make it.
Now that goes against what Todd Callender said, because the big fat guy would be more tender.
Oh, dear Lord.
Donner party of 37.
Yeah, Mike just stole my comment. So Rick, his surname is actually a pseudonym. His actual name is Rick Donner. You may remember him from the Donner Pass, kind of famous thing that happened in Northern California. So Mike Sterling always Like Sterling always bats clean up. I'm nowhere near being the smartest person in the room. So for me, I can't add anything to what the four of you have already added. So I'm just going to flip a coin and that's it. Because I don't have anything else to add above and beyond y'all. But Mike, I'm sure you have some contrarian standpoint. Let's hear it.
You know, honestly, these four gentlemen have thrown out everything. I mean, you guys just cut the legs right out from under me. You know, who's going to provide the most value to the community, and who is going to be the smallest pain in the ass for me to pick up the pieces for afterwards. I don't know. I will throw this one out there. I mean, if I don't have a woman of my own, which one's got the better looking wife? I'm just saying.
Man.
Yeah,
that's the only thing I can throw out.
Usually, the more high maintenance they are too. Though.
Right. Mike did not disappoint. I told you he would have a contrarian standpoint. So while we're wrapping up here, just want to mention a couple quick things. Go to cloudhub.com. Y'all hear me say it over and over again. CLOUTHUB.com. Todd owns the platform. It is truly the only censorship-free platform out there. Elon has moved the needle, but it's not entirely, free speech. I've shown people screenshots where somebody made a moronic comment on a political story, and I was warned not to use the word moron because it might hurt somebody's feelings. That stuff doesn't happen on CloudHub as long as you're within the parameters of the law and you're not doing anything distasteful pornography wise. Nobody's going to censor you on CloudHub. Todd Savage, survivalretreatconsulting.com. If and when Cindy and I build another property, we will be using Todd because the wealth of hands-on knowledge and experience that he has is phenomenal. He's aware of things that the average person would not be aware of. So if you're investing in that final place where you're either going to live or bug out to, you want to be as safe and as well prepared as possible, Todd's your man. For the rest of you out there who don't have a budget to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, go see Rick's company, landofland.com. I mentioned it to Jason Sawyer this morning, and everybody watches Survival Dispatch knows who Jason is, one of our top influencers. His wife, Christy, is a real estate agent. She overheard the conversation. She became part of the conversation, and they will probably become a customer of Rick's in the not too distant future. It's an incredible value proposition. I don't know anywhere else that you can accomplish what he's offering, his team is offering. So other than that, that's it. Appreciate all y'all's time. Everybody out there in Survival Dispatch land, be safe.
Thanks for having us.
Remote meetings have quite a few benefits. Data security isn't one of them. Until now. Presenting CloudHub Meets, a safe, simple, and secure meeting platform that puts you in complete control of your data. With HIPAA-compliant paid and free plans cheaper than Zoom, there are no apps to install, no saved data, and no big brother tracking your every move. Stop worrying if the services you use are using you and sign up for CloudHub Meets today at cloudhubmeets.com.